The stale scent of disinfectant and the faint, lingering aroma of burnt popcorn hung in the air of the Megamart superstore. For Arthur Sterling, CEO of Sterling Retail Group, it was a smell he hadn't truly experienced in over 2 decades. His office, a minimalist masterpiece of glass and chrome on the 40th floor of the city's tallest skyscraper, smelled of artisanal coffee and expensive leather. But today, Arthur was not Arthur Sterling, the titan of retail. Today he was Al, a new hire in the store's bustling front end, complete with a poorly fitting blue polo shirt, an AMA tag that felt a lean on his chest, and a carefully cultivated limp to explain away his slightly awkward movements. Sterling Retail Group, once a beacon of innovation and employee satisfaction, had been struggling. Profits were down, employee morale surveys showed alarming dips, and customer complaints were on the rise. Arthur, a man who prided himself on data-driven decisions, found himself staring at spreadsheets that offered no answers. His executive team proposed aggressive cost-cutting, new marketing campaigns, and even layoffs. But Arthur, a self-made man who had started his career stocking shelves, had a gut feeling. He felt a disconnect, a growing chasm between the corporate rhetoric of employee family and the reality on the ground. So, against the vehement advice of his board, he embarked on an undercover mission, a desperate attempt to rediscover the soul of his company. His first few days were a blur of mundane tasks. He stacked shelves, cleaned spills, and navigated the labyrinthine back aisles. He observed the relentless pace, the thinly stretched staff, the weary smiles offered to demanding customers. The employees were polite, efficient, but there was an underlying tension, a palpable exhaustion that hummed beneath the surface of their forced cheerfulness. He saw the subtle eye rolls when a manager walked by, the quick, hushed conversations that ceased abruptly when a supervisor approached. It was a far cry from the vibrant, engaged workforce he remembered building. On his 3rd day, Arthur was assigned to the checkout lanes, a position he hadn't held since his college days. The rhythmic beeping of scanners and the constant flow of customers were a monotonous symphony. He watched his fellow cashiers, their fingers flying across keypads, their voices reciting prices with practiced monotony. That's when he saw her. Her name tag read Chloe. She was young, perhaps early 20s, with bright, intelligent eyes that currently held a sheen of unshed tears. Her movements were jerky, her smile brittle, and every now and then she would subtly wipe her nose with the back of her hand. A small, crumpled tissue lay discarded beside her register. She was trying to hide it, but the tremor in her voice as she greeted customers, the way she avoided eye contact, betrayed her distress. Arthur's heart, usually a well-guarded vault of strategic calculations, felt a pang. He remembered the young, eager faces he used to hire, full of hope and ambition. What could make a young woman like Chloe cry in the middle of her shift? Was it a personal tragedy, a bad breakup, or something more insidious, something rooted in the very fabric of his company? He decided to observe. He feigned a need to restock plastic bags at his station, positioning himself close enough to hear, but far enough not to seem intrusive. Chloe served customer after customer, her professionalism a thin veneer over her obvious pain. A few times, she paused, her shoulders shaking slightly, before forcing herself to resume the relentless scanning. Then, a customer, an older woman with a kind face, noticed Chloe's distress. "Honey, are you alright?" she asked, her voice gentle. "You look like you've been crying." Chloe flinched, her eyes darting around nervously. "Oh no, ma'am, I'm fine," she mumbled, her voice thick. "Just allergies." She forced a watery smile. The customer, unconvinced, simply nodded and paid, her gaze lingering with concern. Arthur watched, his concern deepening. This wasn't just allergies. This was profound sadness. He considered breaking cover, asking her directly, but he knew that would jeopardize his mission. He needed to understand the root cause, not just to offer a temporary comfort. A few minutes later, the line at Chloe's register thinned. She took a deep breath, her shoulders slumping. Just then, another cashier, an older woman named Maria, whose NAMA tag indicated she was a team lead, approached Chloe's station. Maria's face was etched with worry. "Chloe, you okay, sweetie?" Maria whispered, leaning in. "You look like you've seen a ghost." Chloe shook her head, her lower lip trembling. It's the numbers. "Maria, I just got my review from Mr. Henderson. He says my scan rate is still too low. He said if I don't improve by the end of the month, they'll have to reevaluate my position." Her voice broke on the last words, and a fresh wave of tears welled up in her eyes. Maria sighed, a sound of weary resignation. "Oh honey, don't listen to him. He says that to everyone. It's impossible to meet those targets, especially with the new system, but he said I'm costing the company money." Chloe sobbed, her voice barely audible. "He said I'm not pulling my weight. I work so hard, Maria. I barely take breaks. I stay late, but I just can't go any faster. My hands start to cramp, and then I make mistakes, and then he yells at me for the mistakes, which slows me down even more." She trailed off, burying her face in her hands. Arthur felt a cold dread creep up his spine. Henderson, that was the store manager. He knew Henderson was a hard-nosed manager, focused on metrics. But this was beyond simple performance management. Maria put a comforting hand on Chloe's shoulder. "I know, sweetie, we all know. He's pushing everyone to the breaking point. He's trying to hit some bonus target for himself, probably. But it's not fair to you, or any of us." Then, Maria leaned in closer, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. But in the quiet lull between customers, Arthur heard it. Every single word. "He told me yesterday, Chloe, that if we don't hit 95% scan rate efficiency this quarter, they're going to start cutting shifts. Not just for the low performers, but across the board. He said we'll make it so miserable for them, they'll quit on their own. And we won't have to pay severance." He said it with a smile. Chloe, a smile. The words hit Arthur like a physical blow. His blood ran cold. He felt a sickening lurch in his stomach, a wave of nausea. "We'll make it so miserable for them. They'll quit on their own, and we won't have to pay." This wasn't just a manager pushing for numbers. This was a deliberate, calculated strategy to force employees out, to circumvent labor laws, to exploit the vulnerable. This was corporate malice, disguised as efficiency. He stood frozen, the plastic bags forgotten in his hands. This was the one thing. This was the rot he had sensed, the cancer eating away at the heart of his company. He, Arthur Sterling, the man who prided himself on ethical business practices, on building a company that cared for its people, was unknowingly presiding over a system designed to crush the very individuals who kept it running. His mind reeled. He remembered the recent spike in voluntary resignations, the HR reports that had attributed them to market competitiveness or personal reasons. He remembered the board meetings where the cost-cutting measures were lauded as lean operations and streamlined efficiency. He had signed off on the new performance metrics, trusting his regional managers to implement them fairly. He had trusted Henderson. He had trusted his own judgment, which had been clouded by the sterile data and the insulated bubble of the executive suite. The anger began to simmer, a slow burn that quickly ignited into a raging inferno. Not just anger at Henderson, but at himself. How could he have been so blind, so detached? He had built this empire on the backs of people like Chloe and Maria, people who worked tirelessly, who believed in the company, and he had allowed them to be systematically ground down, dehumanized, and ultimately discarded like faulty products. He wanted to rip off the ridiculous polo shirt, storm over to Henderson's office, and unleash a torrent of fury. He wanted to pull Chloe into a comforting embrace and assure her that everything would be all right. But he couldn't. Not yet. He needed more. He needed irrefutable proof. A mountain of evidence that would silence any dissent from his board, any attempt by Henderson to deny or deflect. Over the next few days, Arthur became a silent, relentless investigator. He continued his cashier duties, but his senses were heightened. His observations raised. He watched Henderson like a hawk. He saw the manager's condescending smiles, his thinly veiled threats, his public shaming of employees who fell short of the impossible targets. He saw the fear in the eyes of the staff, the way they scurried to avoid Henderson's gaze, the hushed whispers about the list of employees who were on notice. He discovered that the 95% scan rate efficiency was a new, internally generated metric, far exceeding industry standards and the capabilities of the aging scanning equipment. It was a target designed to be unattainable, a pretext for forced attrition. He observed how Henderson would deliberately assign the most challenging tasks, registers with faulty scanners, shifts with unusually high customer traffic, to employees he wanted to push out, setting them up for failure. He saw the toll it took. Maria, the seasoned team lead, who had once been a vibrant, energetic presence, now moved with a defeated slump, her eyes perpetually tired. He overheard a young stock clerk, barely out of high school, talking on his phone, desperately trying to pick up extra shifts at a fast food restaurant because his hours at Megamart had been inexplicably cut. He saw the constant pressure to upsell, to push loyalty programs, to meet quotas on credit card applications, all adding layers of stress to an already demanding job. He also witnessed moments of quiet defiance, of solidarity. Maria would discreetly slow down her own scan rate to help a struggling colleague, knowing it would put her own numbers at risk. Employees would share tips on how to appear busy even when there was no work, just to avoid Henderson's wrath. They were a family forged in adversity, protecting each other from the very company that claimed to be their family. One afternoon, Arthur deliberately slowed his own scan rate, making a few mistakes to see Henderson's reaction firsthand. Within minutes, Henderson was at his register, his smile a thin, predatory line. "Al, is there a problem here?" Henderson asked, his voice deceptively calm. "Your efficiency is dipping. We can't have that, can we? Not when we're all pulling our weight." He leaned in, his voice dropping. "You know, Al, some people just aren't cut out for the pace here. It's a fast-moving environment. If you can't keep up, maybe this isn't the right fit for you." Arthur met his gaze, his own eyes, usually warm, now cold and hard. "I'm doing my best, sir," he said, his voice flat, playing the part of the intimidated employee. He felt the disgust rising in his throat, but he swallowed it, maintaining his cover. He needed to see this through. He spent another week gathering more evidence, documenting every instance of intimidation, every impossible quota, every whispered complaint. He learned about the fear of speaking up, the lack of a confidential HR channel, the pervasive belief that corporate didn't care. He even managed to discreetly record a few conversations with Henderson, using a tiny voice recorder he had purchased, capturing the manager's veiled threats and manipulative tactics. Finally, the day came. It was the end of his undercover assignment. He had arranged a surprise regional meeting, ostensibly for a performance review with all the store managers, including Henderson. The meeting was held in a neutral conference room away from the store. Arthur walked in, no longer Al in his ill-fitting polo. He was Arthur Sterling, dressed in a sharp, tailored suit, his usual aura of quiet power fully restored. The regional managers, who had been expecting a standard review, stiffened. Henderson, who had been preening, his chest puffed out, visibly paled. "Good morning, gentlemen," Arthur said, his voice calm, but with an edge of steel. "Thank you for coming. We're here today to discuss the future of Sterling Retail Group, and more specifically, the future of our employees." He began with a general overview, the usual corporate pleasantries. Then, he paused, his gaze sweeping over the room, finally resting on Henderson. "I've spent the last 2 weeks in the field," Arthur announced, the words dropping like stones into a silent pond. "Working alongside our frontline staff, stocking shelves, cleaning floors, and yes, even working a register." A collective gasp went through the room. Henderson's face was now "What I observed," Arthur continued, his voice rising, "was not the company I built. It was not the culture of respect and support that I believe in. I saw exhaustion, and I saw a deliberate, unethical strategy to drive our dedicated employees to quit, simply to avoid paying them the severance they are legally and morally entitled to." He looked directly at Henderson. "Mr. Henderson, your methods are not only abhorrent, they are illegal. Your 95% scan rate efficiency target is a sham, designed to fail. Your intimidation tactics, your manipulation of schedules, your deliberate creation of a hostile work environment. It all stops today," Henderson stammered. "Sir, I was just trying to meet targets, to improve efficiency. The numbers," Arthur held up a hand. "Don't talk to me about numbers, Mr. Henderson. I've seen your numbers, and I've seen the human cost of your numbers. I have recordings, I have testimonies, and I have my own first-hand experience." He then pulled out a small, crumpled tissue from his pocket, the very one Chloe had discarded. "This, gentlemen, is not just a tissue. It represents the tears of a young woman, a dedicated employee who was made to feel worthless, disposable, because she couldn't meet an impossible quota designed to break her." He then detailed everything he had witnessed, the impossible targets, the cut shifts, the emotional toll. He played the recordings of Henderson's callous remarks. The room was silent, save for the occasional intake of breath. The other managers looked horrified, some clearly recognizing the truth in his words, others perhaps complicit in similar, albeit less extreme, practices. "Effective immediately," Arthur announced, his voice firm and unwavering. "Mr. Henderson, your employment with Sterling Retail Group is terminated. You will be escorted from the premises. Furthermore, we will be launching a full, independent audit of all HR practices, performance metrics, and management conduct across every Megamart location. Any manager found to be engaging in similar unethical practices will face immediate termination and potential legal action." He then turned to the other managers, his gaze softening slightly. "This is not a witch hunt. This is a course correction. We will be implementing new, fair performance metrics. We will be investing in better equipment and more staff. We will be creating a confidential, anonymous reporting system directly to my office. And most importantly, we will be rebuilding a culture where every employee feels valued, respected, and safe." Later that day, Arthur returned to the Megamart Superstore. He walked directly to the checkout lanes. Chloe was there, still at her register, her eyes still a little red, but her movements a little less jerky. Maria was also there, looking tired but resolute. Arthur approached Chloe's register. She looked up, her eyes widening slightly as she recognized Al, the quiet new hire. "Chloe," Arthur said, his voice gentle, "my name is Arthur Sterling. I'm the CEO of this company." Chloe's jaw dropped. Maria, standing nearby, gasped, covering her mouth with her hand. "I want to apologize to you personally," Arthur continued, his voice thick with emotion. "I heard what Mr. Henderson said. I heard what he was doing, and I am profoundly sorry for the pain and distress he caused you, and so many others. It was unacceptable, it was wrong. and it will never happen again. Chloe stared at him, tears welling up again. But this time, they were tears of relief, of shock, of a burden finally lifted. "Mr. Sterling," she whispered, unable to form a coherent sentence. Arthur reached into his pocket and pulled out a small, neatly folded piece of paper. "This is a letter, Chloe. It's a formal apology from the company. It's also a promotion. You're now a senior team lead, effective immediately, with a significant raise. And I want you to work with Maria and with me to help us rebuild this company to ensure that no employee ever has to cry at their register again." Maria, tears streaming down her own face, stepped forward and hugged Chloe tightly. Arthur spent the rest of the day walking through the store, talking to employees, listening to their stories, offering genuine apologies and promises of change. He felt a profound sense of humility, a stark reminder that leadership was not just about numbers and strategies, but about empathy, integrity, and the courage to confront uncomfortable truths. The changes at Sterling Retail Group were not immediate, nor were they easy. It took months of dedicated effort, of rebuilding trust, of retraining managers, of investing in people. Henderson's tactics had left deep scars, but slowly, gradually, the atmosphere in the Megamart stores began to shift. The forced smiles became genuine. The hushed whispers turned into open conversations. The fear began to dissipate, replaced by a cautious optimism. Chloe, with her newfound confidence and leadership role, became a vocal advocate for her colleagues, her bright eyes shining with renewed purpose. Maria, her weariness replaced by a quiet strength, became a mentor and a pillar of support. Arthur Sterling, the CEO, never forgot his time as Al. He kept the blue polo shirt in his office, a constant, tangible reminder of the day he walked in, saw a cashier crying, and heard the one thing no boss should ever hear. It was the day he stopped looking at spreadsheets and started truly seeing his people, the day he rediscovered the true meaning of leadership, and the day he began to heal the soul of his company.